one of the most dominant bands in heavy metal history. Founded in 1995 in Des Moines, Iowa by Sean Crahan, Joey Jordison, and Paul Gray, Slipknot would eventually go on to become one of the most prolific heavy metal bands worldwide in decades. While the road eventually led Slipknot to the top of the world, it was long and winding, and there was no shortage of tragedy. This is the tragic history of Slipknot. Things began for the band as innocent as most bands when they're first forming. The ideas were flowing among Sean, Paul, and Joey, who would regularly stay up all night in the gas station where Joey worked overnight to feverishly plan for the future of Slipknot and go over every fine detail of their image and sound. Without a record deal, the three friends knew they had to take a major risk to make this project that they believed in a success. They did whatever it took to come up with a whopping $40,000 to fund their first masterpiece. They entered the studio and worked tirelessly with ruthless aggression on what would eventually become Mate, Feed, Kill, Repeat. The project was released on Halloween of 1996 and garnered the band local radio play, but unfortunately, the band didn't receive any attention from labels. Knowing they needed to add some melody to their band, the group recruited the frontman of a local band that was largely unknown. The rock band Stone Sour had been creating buzz among locals, but was also an unsigned local band. Singer Corey Taylor would go on to join Slipknot. With the momentum of onboarding a highly talented young singer, Slipknot reconvened and entered the studio to create a 5-song demo with the goal of attracting a sizable record label that could give them the backing they needed to truly bring their vision to life. While the young band was struggling to make it, their newly minted frontman had also struggled with substance abuse issues and also the pain of being sexually abused as a child. At just the age of 18, Corey Taylor decided to take his own life. He ingested numerous pills and was discovered by his girlfriend's mother, who ultimately rushed him to the hospital, saving his life. Taylor was fed a substance that forced him to vomit up the pills he had taken. He was at the lowest point of his life, one that he no longer felt was worth living. But it was then a chance encounter watching the MTV VMAs. After watching an over-the-top performance by rock titans Faith No More on the award show, Corey Taylor decided to take his life in a musical direction. It was a decision that ultimately saved his life. Despite having found a new passion in life, Corey would later struggle with substance and alcohol-related issues for years. A recurring theme for the young band, Slipknot spent many of their earlier years using substances and abusing alcohol. The decision to enter the studio to record a demo was a wise one. The band eventually landed a $500,000 7-album deal from Roadrunner Records. Their debut album quickly went platinum, and they attracted the attention of MTV and went on their first summer tour on Ozfest in 1999. The 9-member outfit was quickly gaining an international reputation for their extremely aggressive live performances and their signature masks and jumpsuits. While they were very publicly riding the waves of success, members of the band were privately spiraling out of control. The rock star lifestyle became synonymous with Slipknot. Something that far too frequently comes coupled with drugs and alcohol became a regular fixture in the recording studio and backstage at Slipknot shows. During the recording sessions for the band's iconic album Iowa, the band was on a collision course with tragedy, where substance abuse within the band had elevated to an all-time high. In interviews, members of Slipknot have characterized that era of the band as one that was dangerous and could have nearly claimed the lives of multiple members. Joey Jordison described the Iowa recording process as a very dark time for the band. He says, "Some of our strongest and most meaningful songs are on that record, but we were all on drugs and drunk, and it sucked. It's a time I don't like to talk about much because I don't like to condone any drug use whatsoever." Founding bassist Paul Gray echoed that sentiment, saying, "Everyone was partying a bit more than they should have. Going into the record, I started doing lines of coke all the time, and writing music doing lines, but I thought everything was cool. Clown said it was a disaster because the world got in, sophomore record, drugs, women, just listening to, you guys are gonna be huge, everybody wants our money, so I hate that album. He continued saying, we almost all died. It was bad. There were chemicals. I was probably the worst. Guitarist Mick Thompson had become increasingly frustrated by the drug use and partying within the band. He became isolated from his bandmates, refusing to take part in the activities. He would stay away from the backstage areas of Slipknot shows to avoid the drugs and women that were frequenting the post-show areas of concert venues. The explosive worldwide success of Slipknot had been too much for some members to handle, and the rock star lifestyle of some members had torn apart friendships that many have had with each other within the band for a number of years. Mick Thompson was candid about his concerns for his bandmates and their hard partying ways. He said, I was disgusted by those of us that got sucked into that world of sex and drugs. I wasn't hanging out in the dressing room and chasing skirt every night. Sorry, not my thing. I just avoided people. On days off, you'd never see me out of my hotel room. I'd go, okay, now I got about 16 hours where I don't have to hear everyone else's voice. It doesn't say hate in Japanese on my forearm for no reason. I'd rather be alone than be around a bunch of people that I don't care about and don't care about me and are full of shit. I can sit at home and play Xbox, play my guitar, bear off, sleep. What else do you need? Slipknot continued their explosive growth into their third album, The Subliminal Verses. As their success continued to mount, so did their substance abuse issues. Vocalist Corey Taylor, who took his first drink at just the age of 5, was drinking during most of the day and going to the bar almost every night, prohibiting his ability to effectively write new music for the band, which also was frustrating other members. Joey Jordison said the band struggled for 3 months just to get into the same room and begin recording, largely due to the excessive partying many of his bandmates were involved in. Speaking on his efforts to write music with his bandmate, Joey Jordison said, I flew down to Los Angeles and arrived expecting to practice. I walk in and Corey says, no, I'm going to the Rainbow Bar and Grill. And Sean says, no, I'm working on something else. I'm like, we're not jamming? So I get a bottle of Jack Daniels and drink myself into oblivion. Then I wake up at 8 o'clock the next day and say, right, let's jam. And no one wants to. It took us 3 months before everyone came together. Corey Taylor spoke openly on how he was pushing his bandmates away during those dark days. He says, for the most part, I pushed everybody away. I would drink all day and then go to the bar at night. I was the quintessential lead singer. You were gonna cater to my ego and tell me everything was great, and that's so not who I am. Honestly, I never wanted to be like that. I would keep a bottle of Jack next to my bed every day. Instead of figuring out why I was upset, I just drowned in it. I was cheating on my girl at the time, didn't give a shit. I just wanted to feel something other than terrible. By this point in their careers, Slipknot members seemingly had everything, but quietly behind the scenes, everything was falling apart. Speaking on his experience recording for the Subliminal Verses, bassist Paul Gray said, I would spend half the time in the bathroom doing drugs. I'd try to play, and I'd fall out of my chair a couple times and fall asleep in the middle of tracking a song. It was pretty bad. I was severely depressed because after Iowa, we were sick of each other and there was so much hate going around. I didn't feel that way. I wasn't mad at anybody, but everyone else was. And I kind of felt like, oh, my family is moving away from each other. I thought the band might break up. I was like, what would I do? This has been one of the best things that had ever happened to me. I've never wanted to leave this. I'd hear someone say, F it, I'm quitting, I'm out. And that would freak me out. I'd be like, what are we gonna do now? Those problems always work themselves out, but I dig myself in deeper holes. And then finally, all that had to stop, or I knew I was going to die. But once you get to a certain point, it's so hard going through withdrawal. It's so bad. It's not that you want to quit. You just can't. While many of the demons members of Slipknot were facing were directly related to substance abuse, other members of the band began getting clean, but unfortunately, they faced other problems of their own. Guitarist Jim Root noted that he had gotten sober during the recording process of this album, but that he was also in a horrible state of mind. He said, "I would lock myself in my bedroom because I couldn't handle talking to anybody. I had panic attacks so bad, my entire body would shut down and I had to isolate myself. We had just come off tour with Stone Sour. All of a sudden, we got to do subliminal verses, and I got to be around these people I haven't talked to for nearly 2 years. I had stopped doing drugs, I had stopped drinking, but my head was so f***ed up that I saw a psychiatrist to help me cope. I would pick up on things that weren't even real and turn them into something that it wasn't. I was so inwardly focused that I thought everything was about me. If Joey and Clown were talking, all of a sudden, in my head, they'd be talking shit about me." The Subliminal Verses recording process was one of the most tumultuous times during Corey Taylor's tenure within the band. His alcohol consumption had reached dangerous levels, and his brushes with attempts to take his own life had unfortunately not come to an end. Through the constant cycle of abuse during that time, Corey Taylor attempted to jump out of a hotel window at the Hyatt on Sunset Boulevard. Thankfully, his friend Tommy and his wife at the time were there to talk him down from jumping out of the 8-story window. The very next day, Corey Taylor made a decision that would ultimately save his life. He said, "We were in the studio for 3 months and I hadn't laid down a stitch of vocals that I could call good. I was just so frustrated that I was about to quit the band. I was on the phone buying a plane ticket. It took Clown to talk me down. He said, 'Look, we're gonna figure this out.' Clown has always been kind of a father figure for me in a weird way, even though we're only 4 years apart. I was going through a constant cycle of abuse, and it culminated with me at the Hyatt on Sunset, almost jumping out of an 8-story window. If my buddy Tommy and my wife hadn't been there to talk me down, I'd be dead. The next day I quit drinking for 3 years until me and my wife split up. I had such clarity in those 3 years because I had nothing to hide behind, and it took that sobriety to realize that my relationship was not for me. We had done too much damage to each other, and as much as we cared about each other, we were such gnarly personalities. I listen to Volume 3 now, and it's harder to listen to for me than Iowa because of what I went through." Although Corey Taylor had a lapse in sobriety due to his divorce, he has since gotten sober and gone on to become a vocal advocate for those dealing with substance abuse issues. He's even received awards for his outspoken advocacy for those in the rock and metal community who were dealing with substance abuse problems. Unbelievably, despite having multiple platinum albums, massive arena tours, and becoming arguably one of the biggest bands on the planet, Corey Taylor claims to have only had $2,000 in his bank account at Christmas 2004. He said, "It's hard for me to talk about. Dude, we got f***ed by our old management so bad. We were young, we were really stupid, and we were duped. We thought that people were going to look out for us, and they weren't. But by the time we got to Volume 3, we had found our current manager, Corey Brennan. He had worked at Roadrunner and had been around since the beginning. Slipknot toured the world in support of the Subliminal Verses up until late 2005, where they would eventually go on a lengthy hiatus. Slipknot would stay dormant up until late 2007, where they would begin work on their next album. It was during this time that Corey Taylor decided he needed to walk away from his relationship, but he also couldn't understand why he was so unhappy when he was on the Family Values tour in 2006. He said, "I was on Family Values with Stone Sour and I was miserable. I was watching all these bands make $20 and having the time of their lives. They're going on in the middle of the day and there's no one there and they're just going for it. And here I am, third from the top of the bill, and I'm miserable. I went, there's something wrong here. I used to live to do this. I used to kill to do this. That's when I really started to focus again. The whole time I thought my biggest problem was with the shit around me. But there's something inside me that's not right, and that's affecting me. And all roads led back to my marriage. Walking away from my wife was the best thing I could have done. I realized I needed to stand on my own and figure out who I am, and I did. It was the toughest step I've ever taken, and I went through a year and a half of hell and came out on the other side reborn, bigger and stronger. I started writing lyrics for All Hope Is Gone in the middle of the Stone Sour tour cycle. I sat down and filled notebooks. I started to feel hungry again, and I wanted to make another Slipknot album. I hadn't felt that way in years. The band was able to produce the album away from Los Angeles, where they felt there were a significant number of people who were trying to take advantage of them. The album was eventually finished in June of 2008, and Slipknot embarked on the All Hope Is Gone World Tour shortly thereafter. The band toured in support of the album through late 2008 until October 31st, 2009, where they eventually decided to go on their third hiatus. The All Hope Is Gone album cycle was largely uneventful, at least in the public eye. And privately, members of the band seemed to be getting sober, with fewer rumblings about the band's backstage antics, which had been quite prominent during Slipknot's 2 previous albums. While things seemed to be headed in the right direction for members of the band, this was unfortunately not the case for each member. After the members of Slipknot went their separate ways, various members began working on their own respective side projects. Joey had the Murder Dolls, Corey Taylor of course had Stone Sour, and bassist Paul Gray began working with a supergroup known as Hail. In May of 2010, Gray was scheduled to go on tour with the group Hail, but a shocking tragedy would soon bring the metal world to a standstill. On May 24, 2010, emergency personnel rushed to a hotel in Urbandale, Iowa. They had received reports of an unconscious and unresponsive man inside the room. Details were thin. It was around this time that the Slipknot bassist had left his home and wasn't answering his phone. Gray's wife later testified that the musician had relapsed in 2008, and the final weeks of his life were a haze. The musician checked into an extended stay hotel following an attempt from his family to stage an intervention. Following 2 days of frantic attempts to locate Gray, the family contacted hotel staff and asked them to check his room to see if he was okay. It was at this point that they discovered Gray's body.
911.
I have a gentleman we believe has passed away.
Do what?
We believe this gentleman has passed away.
Do you happen to know his name?
Looks like all the bills there that says Paul Gray.
Alrighty, I'll have the officer in the unit meet you over there, okay?
Okay.
Paul Derek Gray was only 38 years old. The following day, the grief-stricken band conducted an unmasked press conference in honor of their late bandmate. Clown said he was kind of the person in the band that really wanted everybody in the band to always get along and just concentrate on the band. He was a really great friend and just a great person. He's going to be sadly missed, and the world is going to be a different place without him.
He was everything that was wonderful about this band and about this group of people.
Gray was laid to rest in a private funeral held on May 28, 2010, and he was buried at the Highland Memory Gardens Cemetery in Des Moines. In September of 2012, Gray's doctor, Daniel Baldy, was charged with involuntary manslaughter related to Gray's death, as well as the deaths of at least 7 others. The accusation stated the doctor continually wrote high-dose prescriptions and narcotics to Gray. On May 1st, 2014, a jury found the doctor not guilty on all 7 counts of involuntary manslaughter following 2 days of deliberation. As part of civil litigation in January of 2018, Gray's family received an out-of-court settlement from the lawsuit they filed against Dr. Baldy and his former employers. 2 months later, Baldy was banned from being able to prescribe, administer, or dispense any controlled substances for treatment of chronic pain from the Iowa Board of Pharmacy. Slipknot members to this day continue to pay homage to their late bandmate and even name their next album, The Gray Chapter, in honor of his memory. As the band began working on that album, they had come to a difficult consensus. On December 12, 2013, the group released a shocking announcement that drummer Joey Jordison had left the band after 18 years due to personal issues. Joey Jordison quickly followed that statement up, disputing their claim, and stated he, quote, did not quit Slipknot and he was shocked and blindsided by the news. The group eventually added 2 anonymous members of the band that they were quick to point out were not, quote, permanent members. One member would take the place of late bassist Paul Gray. Another would take the place of recently departed drummer Joey Jordison. The bassist, affectionately known as V-Man, was subsequently identified by a tattoo on his hand, a move that made other members of Slipknot unhappy because they wanted to conceal the identity of the members, who they claimed were not official bandmates. Jay Weinberg was tapped as the band's drummer, notably the son of Max Weinberg, the longtime drummer for Bruce Springsteen. The band's album, Point 5 The Great Chapter, was a tremendous success for the band, and they toured worldwide with a few bumps and bruises along the way, but it was arguably the most organized iteration of Slipknot ever. The members of the band were no longer dealing with the substance abuse issues that had haunted them in the past, and millions of fans around the world were attending their shows. While it's never specifically been addressed whether or not the 2 new members of Slipknot are permanent, there is still rampant speculation and hope from some Slipknot fans that drummer Joey Jordison may one day return to the band. Slipknot recently released a new single titled All Out Life, presumed to be from their upcoming highly anticipated 2019 album. Today, Slipknot is a worldwide success, even though they had every reason not to be. While their album All Hope Is Gone is now nearly 10 years old, it's apparent that the band found hope somewhere and the strength to carry on. That's all for now. If you're new to Rockfeed and want to see more videos like this one, hit subscribe with notifications on. We also publish daily video news about hard rock and heavy metal bands. If you've made it this far, thanks for joining Rockfeed. We appreciate you, and we'll see you all very soon.